Driving across Hell's highways, everyone was prepared for today's big event, the Harvest Moon Festival. A few days ago, shortly after we finished updating our communication devices, Stolas gave me a call to remind me of our arrangement and to engage in some light flirting. We were of course prepared to keep our half of the bargain. After assuring her that we would arrive, I resumed my work. Here we were now, bouncing in our faithful van around the destroyed and flaming highways of hell. Each member was ready, well, mostly, anyway. Moxie, ever the worrywart, adjusted his tie for the 50th time. This transport should be fast, but there'll likely be congestion. Millie had a proud smile on her face. That's wrath for ya, they know how to move folks around. The van rolled to a stop in front of the gateway. Rolling out of the van, we entered the building, met to the hybrid of an airport terminal and a red and gold decorated concrete chamber. We saw the enormous Wrath Ring's giant elevator transport. Demons of all shapes and sizes bustled around, pushing past each other, arguing with guards, or just standing in line with the kind of defeated patience that screamed, "Hell." Once we made it through the checkpoints with Luna almost biting a guard, we boarded the massive elevator. The whole thing shuddered and groaned as it rose, gears grinding like they hadn't been oiled since the dawn of damnation. Through the clear sides of the elevator, I watched as the Wrath Ring came into view. Reddish-orange skies, towering spires of volcanoes, and farms full of hellbeasts stretched as far as the eye could see. "Home sweet home," Millie said, squeezing Moxie's hand. The way she looked at the fiery landscape was downright sentimental. Leaning on the railing, I let my mind wander. This festival, and us being there, was extremely important. The Harvest Moon Festival brought out the best, the worst, and everything in between. Deals, rivalries, and maybe even potential alliances, all of it was up for grabs. And I wasn't about to let Imp miss out. When the elevator finally stopped, I turned to the team. "Alright, let's make an impression." We piled back into the van and bounced along the dirt paths that cut through Wrath's jagged landscape. Moxie looked like he was being driven to his own execution. He adjusted his tie for the now billionth time, muttering something about composure and first impressions, even though we all knew this wasn't his first rodeo with her parents. Luna, sprawled in the backseat, didn't even look up from her phone. "Bet they're gonna roast you alive, Mox," she drawled. "Luna," I said, grinning as I glanced at Moxie in the rearview mirror, "if they do, make sure to film it. We could use the footage for promotional material." "Very funny," Moxie deadpanned, shooting me a glare. "I can't wait for y'all to meet my kin," Millie said, practically vibrating with excitement. She had the biggest grin on her face, and I could feel her enthusiasm filling the cramped vehicle. "Yeah, great," Moxie muttered, looking like he was already bracing himself for whatever awaited him. Millie didn't seem to hear, too busy giving directions, passing by a sign labeled, "Rough and Tumbleweed Ranch." We pulled up to a sprawling, rough-hewn ranch house. The place looked like it had been cobbled together from every material Wrath could offer. Scorched wood, and twisted metal for good measure. Fields stretched out in all directions, dotted with hulking hellhogs and other massive beasts grazing lazily. Standing on the porch was Millie's family, her dad, Joe, her mom, Lynn, and her towering, battle-scarred siblings, Sally Mae, and an intimidating older brother whose name I couldn't quite remember. All of them were armed to the teeth, even for Wrath standards. "Mama, Daddy," Millie leapt out of the van, practically tackling them in a hug. "Well, look what the hell dragged in," Joe bellowed, patting her on the back with enough force to knock most imps flat. His grin faltered, replaced by a look of thinly veiled disdain. "And you brought him. Good to see you again, sir," Moxie said, straightening his tie and offering a polite smile. Joe crossed his arms, leaning against the porch railing. "Still looking like a stiff breeze could knock yaw over, boy. Don't they feed you where you're from?" "Daddy," Millie scolded, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Lynn, ever the quieter counterpart to Joe's bluster, gave Moxie a polite but cool nod. "Afternoon, Moxie. Still playing that tiny piano, I assume?" It's called a violin, ma'am," Moxie corrected, his smile tightening. "And yes, I am still pursuing my musical interests." Joe snorted. "Pursuing music while Millie's out here wrestling hellhogs. Real impressive." Moxie stiffened but didn't rise to the bait. I assure you, sir, I contribute in many ways to our endeavors. Sally Mae leaned casually against the doorframe, her smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Relax, Moxie. Daddy's just funnin' with ya. Mostly. Chaz said nothing, his eyes flicking between Moxie and Joe like he was waiting for the first spark to ignite. Alright, enough? I stepped forward, clapping Moxie on the back a little harder than necessary. Listen here, cowboy. Moxie might not be the biggest or the loudest, but he's got brains and guts. Two things that are damn hard to come by in hell. He's saved all our asses more times than I can count, and frankly, if you can't see that, then maybe you're not as sharp as you think you are. The porch went dead silent. Joe's eyes narrowed, his hand twitching toward the shotgun slung over his shoulder. For a second, I thought he might actually pull it on me. Then, Lynn chuckled. You must be the infamous boss, Blitz I've heard so much about. That's right, I said, flashing my best grin. Founder and CEO of Immediate Murder Professionals, at your service. Millie's been a rock star on our team, by the way. Couldn't do half of what we do without her. Millie beamed at me, and Joe's scowl softened, just a little. And this, Millie added, gesturing toward Luna as she finally sauntered out of the van, is Blitz's hellhound, Luna. She handles all our bookings and communications. Luna barely glanced up from her phone. Sup? Joe looked her over, his gaze lingering on the spiked collar around her neck. Mean-looking hound you got there, Blitz. She's the best, I said proudly. And she bites, so don't get any ideas. Lynn gave a small, approving nod. Well, ain't this an interesting bunch you've brought, Millie? Their family, Millie said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Joe sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, come on inside, then. Food's on the table, and we can see what this bunch is made of at the festival. We all began to enter. Moxie shot me a grateful look as we followed Millie's family into the house, but that was only natural, or it should be for me as their boss to help out when I'm needed. Now that we have a place to stay until the Harvest Festival begins, it was the perfect time to prepare for their new farmhand, Stryker. Y'all better eat up, Joe said, gesturing to the table. Ain't no room for weak stomachs in Wrath, and we got a long night ahead of us. Millie's siblings were already digging in, their laughter and loud banter filling the room. Moxie hesitated, eyeing the spread with a mix of awe and mild terror. Is that hellhog liver? Sure is, Sally Mae said, grinning as she shoved a forkful into her mouth. You ain't scared, are ya, city boy? Of course not, Moxie said quickly, though his voice cracked just enough to betray him. He grabbed a plate and began piling it with the least intimidating items he could find. I, on the other hand, went straight for the biggest, juiciest piece of meat I could find. Damn, this smells good, I said, taking a bite. You guys really know how to cook. Lynn smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. We do what we can. Ain't much else to do out here, 'cept work and eat. Millie sat down next to Moxie, giving him an encouraging nudge. Don't worry, babe, you'll get used to it. Just think of it as rustic charm. Luna, meanwhile, had already claimed a spot at the far end of the table. She picked at her food with disinterest, occasionally glancing up to glare at anyone who got too close. Joe watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable, before turning his attention back to me. So, Blitz, he said, leaning back in his chair. Millie tells me you're some kind of big shot assassin. That true? Big shot might be stretching it, I said with a grin, but yeah, we handle our fair share of hits. Business is boomin' thanks to your daughter. She's one hell of a killer. Joe's eyes flicked to Millie, who was busy tearing into a hunk of hellhog ribs. She always did have a knack for violence, he said, a hint of pride in his voice. Guess she gets that from me. Guess so, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. Here's to family. The meal continued with a mix of awkward small talk and occasional jabs at Moxie, who was doing his best to keep up. By the time we finished eating, the sun was beginning to set, casting the ranch in an eerie red glow. Joe stood up, stretching his arms. The rest of the family began to head outside to put out the massive bonfire in the back erected to make all this food so quickly. Since I was the guest, I decided to help out and make a lasting good impression on the family, only I didn't expect to meet him. As we gathered around the fire pit, Stryker leaned back in his chair, his hat tipped low over his eyes. "So, Blitzo," he drawled, as I and the rest of Milla's family made our appearance. "Heard you've got a real knack for getting into places you shouldn't. How'd you manage to sweet-talk your way into the living world?" I stiffened for just a moment, my grin from the good meal faltering. This guy was sharp. "Let's just say I've got connections," I said, trying to sound casual. "I have an arrangement." Stryker's smirk widened. "An arrangement, huh? Must be something special to get a Prince of Hell to lend you his grimoire." Before I could respond, Moxie, who'd also had gotten up to help, piped up, his voice tinged with a bit of frustration. "It's not just about brute force, you know. Strategy and intelligence win wars, not just muscle." Joe, who'd finally walked out, snorted, taking a swig from his flask. "Strategy's all well and good, boy, but in Wrath, it's the strong who survive. Ain't no room for thinkers when the hellhogs are chargin'." I saw an opportunity to deflect and chimed in. "He's got a point, Moxie. Sometimes you gotta get your hands dirty. Ain't that right, Stryker?" Stryker's eyes gleamed as he leaned forward. "Damn straight. And speaking of getting dirty, how about we settle this little debate in the pain games tomorrow? See who's really got what it takes." The suggestion was met with cheers from Millie's family, and I couldn't resist the opportunity to see Stryker's strength compared to my own. "You're on, cowboy. But don't think I'm gonna go easy on you." Hours later, the festival grounds were alive with energy. Demons from all over Wrath had gathered to witness the pain games, a brutal competition that tested strength, endurance, and sheer willpower. Stolas, perched on a grand stage adorned with her bright red cape, delivered a speech that was met with a mix of indifference and outright disdain from the crowd. Her attempts to flirt with me didn't go unnoticed either, only added to the awkwardness, and I could feel every eye darting between us even though I didn't respond. As the games began, I made sure to keep an eye on Stryker. If I was going to gain his trust or at the very least convince him I was trustworthy, I needed to prove I was just as tough, if not tougher, than he was. The first event was a hellhog wrangling competition, and I threw myself into it with everything I had. I might not have been born in Wrath, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let some cowboy outshine me. It was much more brutal than I had expected, but was still fun and tested my strategy. Stryker and I quickly emerged as the top contenders. My unorthodox tactics and sheer determination kept me in the running, while Stryker's precision and raw power made him a formidable opponent. Moxie, on the other hand, struggled through each event, his smaller frame and lack of experience putting him at a severe disadvantage. By the end of the games, it was clear that the final showdown would be between me and Stryker. The crowd erupted as Wally Wackford announced the tie, calling both of us to the stage. "You're good competition, maybe we could work together someday in the future," I offered. Stryker only smiled and nodded as we headed the stairs. Stryker, ever the showman, pulled out a guitar and began to sing a taunting song directed at Moxie, who sat in the stands, humiliated and defeated. I tried to lighten the mood by joining Moxie and Millie, casually mentioning that I'd offered Stryker. Moxie's face fell, seeing and presumably guessing what I had told Stryker. "You hired him? After everything?" I shrugged. "He's got skills, Mox. We could use someone like him." Although I was sure Stryker was deadly, maybe I could salvage something up and he wouldn't constantly try and get in our way in the future or go after Moxie. I'd need to stop him from killing Stolas, but otherwise things could work out better than they did previously. Millie, sensing Moxie's distress, suggested he head back to the ranch to clean up. As Moxie trudged away, Stryker's mocking laughter followed him, echoing in his ears. Back at the ranch, I knew something was off. Stryker had been too eager to leave after the announcements of the winners on stage, and I wasn't about to let my guard down. As I pretended to clean up after the games, I kept an eye on him. Sure enough, he slipped away from the group, heading toward his room. With our updated comms, I quickly went up to Luna, who'd been bored almost all day. "Hey Looney, could you turn on Moxie's location? I need it for just 1 second." She shrugged and pulled out her phone. A glowing red dot revealed Moxie had already arrived back at Millie's folks' place. "Lulu, come on, we've got to get there quickly," I said, almost demanding. She gave me a weird look, noticing the slight worry in my eyes, but nodded anyways. I quietly made contact with Millie, who'd be talking with her family, although we no longer used the earbuds as our main communication. Just in case of emergencies, we kept them on us. Me and Luna had already made our way to the house and hastily entered, going into a concealed plan of action as we usually did in infiltration missions. Peeking through the crack in the door, I saw Moxie standing in front of an open gun case, his face pale. Inside was a sleek, Carmen-crafted sniper rifle, its barrel tipped with a blessed round capable of killing demon royalty. Before Moxie could react, Stryker appeared, his expression dark. "Shouldn't be snooping where you don't belong, city boy," he growled, advancing on Moxie. But surprising everyone, Millie jumped in through the window, burst in just in time, slightly out of breath, stabbing Stryker in the shoulder with a knife. But Stryker was quick, overpowering them both and tossing them into the wall. I quickly gave Luna a signal and entered the room by myself, confronting Stryker. Turning his head, he saw me and gave me that same sly smile. "Thought you'd be busy basking in your victory," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Stryker smirked, revealing his true intentions. "You're wasting your potential, Blitzo. Fucking royalty, workin' for sinners, it's beneath you." Looking in the direction of his gun, he continued, "We could be talking down overlords, startin' with that bitch Stolas." I pretended to consider the offer, buying time as Moxie, who snuck in and grabbed the sniper rifle. But he was prepared, sending Moxie flying to the door with a swift kick. I stepped in, but Stryker quickly gained the upper hand. His technique and ferocity overwhelmed me so much so I'd ended up on the ground in a chalking match that I was currently losing. Just as he was about to finish us off, I whistled for Luna. She arrived moments later, kicking open the door and accidentally knocking Moxie into the wall again. Stryker seized the opportunity to escape through the already busted window, seeing as he was getting outnumbered. But before he could grab his weapon, Millie, awoken once more, prevented his attempts with a stab to the hand, sending him reeling and leaping out the window and disappearing into the crowd. "Final," I huffed, catching my breath once more. "He's gone." Back at the ranch, Lynn bandaged Millie's wounds while Joe watched silently. Moxie, emboldened by the night's events, stood up to Millie's parents just like in canon. "Millie's the strongest person I know," he said firmly. "And if you can't see that, then you're the ones who failed." Joe gave a curt nod, a rare acknowledgement of Moxie's courage. As we prepared to leave, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We'd faced down a deadly foe and come out on top, mostly. My fighting was somewhat lacking, and he managed to ragdoll all of us even when 3 people were jumping him. I was left contemplating as the sun rose over the jagged horizon of wrath. We regrouped at our van. The sniper rifle, now safely in our possession, lay across Moxie's lap as he stared at it with a mix of awe and unease. "So, what now?" Luna asked, leaning against the van with her arms crossed. "We've got a weapon that can kill royalty. That's gotta be worth something." I grinned, my usual bravado returning. "Oh, it's worth a lot more than something, Looney. This little beauty is our ticket to the big leagues. But we gotta be smart about it. Can't just go around offing princes without a plan." Moxie adjusted his glasses, his expression serious. "We need to figure out who else might be after Stolas. We don't know who Stryker was working for, there's no telling who else is involved." Millie nodded, her usual cheerfulness tempered by the night's events. "And we gotta make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. Stryker ain't gonna let this go easy." I clapped my hands, my grin widening. "Then it's settled. We've got a new mission, make sure we come out on top. And if we play our cards right, we might just come out of this with more than a fancy gun." As the van rumbled to life, we set off, the weight of our new mission settling over us. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: in hell, survival was just the beginning. And for me and my crew, the real battle was just getting started. It's been a couple of days since we had came back from the Harvest Moon Festival, and everyone was starting to readjust after that night's events while continuing business as usual. Stryker's angelic weapon, the one capable of killing even the most powerful beings in hell, was locked away in my office, but its presence lingered in my mind like a shadow. But bringing it on a mission like this would have been overkill, literally. Currently we were on Earth for an assassination mission, though this human world always felt off to me. Being there in my last life made me see the distinct differences between each of them. This air was too thin, the colors too vibrant, and the constant hum of human activity grated on my ears. Maybe in was just the different environment going from suburban to urban, but it wasn't to my liking. But tonight, it wasn't important. We were here to take out some jealous ex-girlfriend who'd gone off the deep end, threatening to expose her former lover's shady business dealings. Standard stuff, really, but something about it gnawed at me. Maybe it was the way the target's file, it had that same desperate edge I used to see in the mirror back when I was still human, or Blitz had when I thought someone was leaving me. "Sir, are you good?" Moxie's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He was crouched beside me, his crossbow at the ready, his eyes scanning the dimly lit alleyway. Millie was a few feet ahead, her axe gleaming under the flickering streetlight. Luna, who had been tired of just sitting at her desk, wanted in on the mission this time, and currently she had already opened the portal back to hell, just for safety measures, her usual scowl replaced by a rare look of concentration as she monitored the grimoire. Yeah, I'm fine," I muttered, adjusting my grip on my pistol. "Just stay sharp. This alley gives me the creeps." Moxie nodded, but I could tell he was itching to say something. Probably about how I'd been quieter than usual lately. Ever since we'd started tightening up our operations, the team had gotten closer. We were smoother, more efficient, and, dare I say it, almost professional. But that didn't mean I was ready to spill my guts to them about how the weight of my past still haunted me, especially with a clearer mind than before. Not yet, anyway. "Let's move," I said, gesturing toward the target's house-shaped apartment building. In and out, no mistakes. We slipped through the shadows like ghosts, our movements synchronized from now months of practice. The building's security was laughable, a couple of cameras and a rusty lock that Millie picked with ease. But as we made our way up the fire escape, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched as I was observing our environment. Not by humans, but by something else. "Boss, you sure we're clear?" Moxie whispered as we reached the target's floor. "Positive," I lied, peering through the window. The apartment was dark, but I could make out the silhouette of our target pacing back and forth, phone pressed to her ear. "Perfect. Millie, you take point. Moxie, cover the door. I'll handle the target." Millie nodded, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. She loved this part, the thrill of the hunt. Me? I just wanted to ensure the team came out on top. As I slipped through the window, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. We were a well-oiled machine. But even machines had their weak points. The target didn't even see me coming. One second, she was ranting into her phone. The next, she was staring down the barrel of my gun. Her eyes widened in terror. "Sorry, sweetheart," I said, pulling the trigger. The shot was clean, precise. Just like we'd practiced. Now it was Millie's job to disp. The room erupted in chaos. Alarms blared, and the door burst open to reveal a pair of humans in black suits, their weapons trained on us. DHORKS agents. "Shit. Ambush, move," I shouted, tackling Moxie to the ground as a net shot past us. Millie was already through the window, but Luna hesitated, her eyes darting between me and the agents. "Go, we'll catch up," I ordered, and she immediately took off following our new rules in place for assassination missions. Luna disappeared into the night, her human disguise flickering as she sprinted down the fire escape. Millie was already gone, her axe no doubt ready to carve a path through anyone stupid enough to follow her. That left the both of us, surrounded by agents. Not wasting any time, some threw a purple gas towards our direction that spreaded unusually quickly, preparing for a takedown with melee weapon. I feel groggy from the accidental inhalation, and I could only assume Moxie was too, as I could barely see him, my eyes welling up from the mix of tear gas. The agents closed in, their weapons trained on us, and I knew we were in deep shit. "You're not going anywhere, demon," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with self-righteousness. "We've finally caught you off guard. You're not getting away this time," he monologued. I smirked, despite the situation. "Oh, you're way out of your league. But hey, if you're gonna kill us, at least give us a phone call first." The agent's face twisted in anger, but before he could respond, I kicked it into his legs, sending him stumbling. Moxie, still half-conscious, managed to wriggle free from his restraints and lunged at the other agent, tackling him to the ground. It wasn't pretty, but it bought us a few seconds. "Run," I shouted, grabbing Moxie by the arm and dragging him toward the now defenseless door, thanks to Millie. We burst into the hallway, but the agents were hot on our heels. The building was a maze of narrow corridors and flickering lights, and I could hear the agents shouting into their radios, calling for backup. "Boss, we're surrounded. Moxie panted, his crossbow clutched tightly in his hands. I shot back, ducking into a stairwell. We improvise. That's what we do best. All we need to do is hold out until, you know what. We raced down the stairs, but the agents were relentless. Tranquilizer darts whizzed past us, embedding themselves in the walls. One grazed my shoulder, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I shook it off, forcing myself to focus. We couldn't afford to get caught, not by these humans, not by anyone. As we reached the ground floor, I spotted a service exit and made a beeline for it. The door led to a narrow alley, and for a moment, I thought we were home free. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the pavement behind us. The agents had followed us outside. "Moxie, cover me," I barked, pulling out my pistol and firing a few shots to keep the agents at bay. Moxie nodded, his crossbow aimed and ready. He fired a bolt that struck one of the agents in the shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. The other agent hesitated, giving us just enough time to make a break for it. We ran through the alley, our footsteps echoing off the brick walls. I could hear the agents shouting behind us, but they were falling further and further behind. Finally, we reached a dead end. "Shit. Boss, what now?" Moxie asked, his voice tinged with panic. I glanced around, my mind racing. Then I spotted it, a manhole cover. "Down there," I said, pointing. Moxie didn't argue. Together, we eventually pried the cover off the ground. But it was too late by then. Agents from out of nowhere flooded the scene, aimed and seconds away from firing, catching us in our most vulnerable, still lifting the cover due to our collective fatigue. Just as the agents closed in, two figures stepped forward from the crowd. One was a tall, wiry man with a sharp jawline and a perpetual smirk etched into his face. His black suit was immaculate, save for a small pin on his lapel that read Agent 1. The other was a shorter, stockier woman with her hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her eyes were cold and smiled dangerous, and her suit bore a similar pin that read Agent 2. They looked like the kind of people who took their jobs way too seriously, and had the egos to match. Well, Agent 1 said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "The infamous demons. We've been tracking your little murder spree for quite some time. You've been the nuisance, you know. Always slipping through our fingers. But not this time." Introduce Agents 1 and 2 while describing their appearances, have them monologue about how difficult it was to track them, and have Millie and Luna's portal pop right above the two, taking them away and leaving behind a bag of grenades. Back at IMP headquarters, the team was waiting for us. Millie was pacing back and forth, her axe still in hand, while Luna sat at her desk, her usual scowl firmly back in place. They both looked up as we walked in, relief flooding their faces. "Boss, Moxie," Millie exclaimed, rushing over to hug her husband. "We thought you were done for." "We're harder to kill than that," I said, though my voice lacked its usual bravado. "But those agents, they're getting smarter. We need to be more careful." Luna snorted. "No shit, you guys were sloppy out there." I shot her a glare, but I couldn't argue. She was right. We'd gotten cocky, and it almost cost us everything. As I sat down at my desk, my eyes drifted to the locked drawer where Stryker's weapon was hidden. Its presence was a constant reminder of the stakes we were playing with. If humans like those agents ever got their hands on something like that, well, let's just say hell wouldn't be the only place in trouble. "All right, team," I said, clapping my hands to get their attention. "We've got work to do. Let's make sure tonight doesn't happen again." They nodded, their expressions serious. We were a team, and we'd gotten through worse. But as I looked around the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get harder from here. And if we weren't ready, well, let's just say I didn't want to find out what happened next. Agent 2 stepped forward, her arms crossed. "You've been leaving quite the trail of lost bodies and blood behind. Random targets, no clear pattern. It's been frustrating, to say the least. But we finally figured it out. You're not random, you're hired killers. And tonight, we're putting an end to your little operation. Let me give you my Yelp review first. 2 stars, terrible customer service, and the decor is way too human." I spoke up, tired of their rambling. Agent 1's scowl deepened, and he took a step closer. "You think you're funny, don't you? But let's see how funny you are when we're done with you. We've got a whole facility just waiting to crack you open and figure out what makes you demons tick." Agent 2 smirked, pulling out a small device from her pocket. "And don't think your little friends can save you. We've got this whole area locked down. No one's getting in or out." A loud whoosh filled the air, and a swirling portal of crimson light appeared directly above us. The agents froze, their weapons wavering as they stared up at the anomaly. Apparently they've never caught our portal on camera. Before anyone could react, two figures dropped through the portal, Millie and Luna. Millie landed with a battle cry, her axe already swinging. She took out two agents in one fluid motion, their tranquilizer guns clattering to the ground. Luna, in her human disguise, was right behind her, her claws extended and her eyes blazing with fury. She grabbed another agent by the collar and tossed him into a dumpster like he weighed nothing. "Boss, Moxie," Millie shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Get in the portal." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed Moxie by the arm and dragged him toward the portal, which was now hovering just above the ground. The agents were in disarray, shouting orders and scrambling to regroup, but Millie and Luna were holding them off with brutal efficiency. As we reached the portal, Luna tossed a small bag toward the agents, our last resort when it came to situations this deadly. It landed with a clatter, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the bag exploded, sending a cascade of grenades rolling across the ground. The agents barely had time to react before the grenades went off, filling the alley with smoke and debris. "Go," Luna barked, shoving me and Moxie through the portal. Millie followed close behind, her axe still dripping with blood and guts. Luna was the last one through, and as the portal closed behind us, I caught a glimpse of the agents lying on the ground under some rubble, unsure if they had survived. Back at IMP headquarters, the team collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily. Millie was grinning from ear to ear, clearly thrilled with how the rescue had gone. Luna looked annoyed, but there was a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. Moxie was still shaking, his crossbow clutched tightly in his hands. "Well," I said, breaking the silence. "That could have gone worse." Millie laughed, leaning on her axe. "Worse? Boss, we just took out a whole squad of DHORKS agents. That was awesome." Luna rolled her eyes. "Yeah, awesome. Except for the part where you two almost got caught. Again." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Hey, we're fine, aren't we? Besides, it's not like they can track us here." Moxie finally spoke up, his voice trembling. "But, what if they do? Those agents, they're not like the others. They're specifically after us. What if they figure out how to get to us?" I walked over and clapped him on the shoulder. "Relax, Mox. We've been through worse. And if those humans think they can take us down, they've got another thing coming." But as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that Moxie was right. Those agents were different, but I knew better. Without funding, those guys wouldn't stand a chance. With no backing, it shouldn't be too big of an issue, even if they somehow tracked us down again. We'll just have to see what happens next. I shuffled through the stack of papers in my hands, my eyes scanning over the various invoices, bills, and job reports. A deep sense of satisfaction settled in my chest as I noted the increased efficiency in cost management and our overall job's quality. I wasn't one to gloat, but even I had to admit that IMP was operating smoother than ever. As I walked through the office, my hooves clacked against the tiled floor, the sound unusually crisp in the cleaner than usual space. The scattered papers that had just been here a month ago, broken furniture, and questionable stains had been replaced by a relatively neat and organized environment. The faint scent of sulfur and cheap air freshener lingered, an oddly comforting improvement from the usual musk of gunpowder and blood. It wasn't spotless, but it was a significant upgrade. It almost felt professional. What had caused this sudden change? The answer was obvious: Blitz. I didn't completely recognize it before, but a subtle shift in his approach to management was undeniable now. He was still as eccentric as ever, but there was an undeniable sense of discipline in his actions lately. Whether it was intentional or not, I couldn't fully tell, even though he'd said so himself, but IMP was benefiting from it. Passing by the reception desk, I glanced at Luna, who was sprawled out, fast asleep, on the desk. Her long tail lazily twitched, ears flicking occasionally as she snored softly. A rare moment of peace from her usually sharp-tongued demeanor. I sighed, shaking my head slightly but choosing not to wake her. She was more tolerable when she wasn't snapping at everyone. I reached Blitz's office, pushing the door open to find him hunched over his desk, flipping through documents with focus. The sight was almost surreal. His white button-down shirt, slightly wrinkled, and black slacks suggested he had stayed the night. His red eyes, though filled with their usual spark, held a shadow of fatigue. His tail lazily flicked behind him, an occasional twitch showing his thoughts weren't entirely at rest. "Sir," I greeted, stepping forward and placing the documents I carried onto his desk. Blitz barely looked up before his gaze landed on the papers. His eyes scanned the words, and then he snorted. "Internships? You mean free labor?" I adjusted my stance, my tail curling slightly. "It would be a good opportunity to have some extra hands around, sir. At no additional cost." Blitz smirked, flipping through the pages briefly before adding them to a smaller pile of uncompleted papers. He leaned back slightly, stretching his arms with an audible crack before exhaling. His tail flicked against the side of his chair, a sure sign of mild amusement. I hesitated for a moment, observing him. There was something oddly admirable about seeing Blitz like this, super focused, working hard, keeping things together. For all his traits, he had an undeniable knack for keeping Imp afloat. He waved a hand dismissively. "You still standing there for a reason, Mox?" I quickly shook my head. "No, sir." With a small nod, I turned and exited, prepared to work just as hard, closing the door behind me. Blitz's perspective. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling as I rubbed my eyes. I wasn't one to complain, but damn, working this much took a toll. Still, I couldn't deny that the results were paying off. Imp was running better than ever, and I actually felt good about it. Sure, I was exhausted, but the satisfaction made it worth it. As I mulled over the recent improvements, my legs curled lazily around the armrest of my chair. With the internship papers on my desk, my mind drifted to the idea of expanding. With the way things were going, it wasn't impossible. Maybe new office space? Maybe a second location? The thought was exciting, but I knew better than to jump the gun. We weren't quite ready. Not yet. Still, the idea in itself left me with a smirk on my face. I grabbed the bigger stack of documents on my desk and stood up, placing them in my drawer to organize them later into my file cabinet, stretching cartoonishly until my spine popped. Changes were happening, but more needed to be done. Grabbing my walkie-talkie from my belt, I clicked it on. "Millie, front entrance." A crackle came through before her enthusiastic voice replied, "On my way, sir." I made my way downstairs, my tail swaying slightly behind me, passing Luna, who had curled up in a pillow and throw blanket. Stepping outside, I found Millie waiting eagerly, bouncing on her heels. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Hey, Blitz, what are we shopping for?" I paused, smirking at her growing curiosity. My tail flicked as I exaggerated my hesitation, making her cross her arms with a huff. She narrowed her eyes playfully. "Come on, you can't just call me out here and not tell me." I chuckled. "Fine, I'll spill." I leaned slightly forward. "We're buying a robot." Millie's eyes widened, and her mouth was slightly agape before breaking into a grin. "A robot? What's up with that?" I nodded, the smirk still on my face. Things were changing, all right. And I planned to make the most of it. "You'll know soon," I said, beginning our journey. As Millie and I made our way through the streets of hell, the usual commotion buzzed around us. Demons bickered, imps scurried about, and the occasional explosion in the distance sent a brief gust of heat our way. A nearby vendor yelled about fresh organs on sale, and a group of sinners were running from a much larger, angrier demon. I didn't think it was ideal taking our car since it was nearby and Millie didn't seem to mind the people too much. "So, sir," Millie said, practically skipping beside me, rocking her arms every step, "what kinda robot we talking about here? Like, a helper round the office, or something with weapons? Or, is it, for that use?" I rubbed my chin dramatically. "A little bit of both. Thought it might be fun to have some extra security, I said, in a joking tone. Millie could only shake her head. "No, seriously, tell me, is it gonna be like one of those high-tech assassins? Or something with lasers?" "Maybe." I gave her a teasing look, enjoying how invested she was. Truth was, I wasn't entirely sure what kind of robot we'd be getting. I just knew it had to be something cool and useful. Millie clapped her hands together, her tail curling in excitement. Moxie's gonna flip. You know how he gets with our finances. I snorted. Yeah, he'll probably complain first. Say something about how impractical it is or how we don't need it. But give it a day, and he'll be all over it. We reached the tech district, neon signs flashing advertisements for all sorts of mechanical contraptions. Shops lined the streets, each boasting the latest and greatest in Hell's technological advancements. A giant billboard above us displayed a grinning demon in a lab coat, promising infernal innovations. Make your enemies obsolete. I pulled out a small card from my pocket. There's a place up ahead that's supposed to have what we're looking for. Millie leaned over, reading the name. Asmodean Demon Tech Robotics? Sounds fancy and familiar. Oh, it is, I said, leading the way toward the entrance. Remember the robot in Lulu Land? Yeah, we're getting something better than that. And if we're lucky, we might just walk out of here with something real special. Millie grinned as she followed. Well, sir, I sure hope it's got lasers. With that, we stepped inside, the doors sliding open with an ominous hiss, ready to see what the future of IMP's arsenal would look like. The moment we stepped into Asmodean Demon Tech Robotics, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick and humid, the hum of machinery filling the room, and neon lights flickering against the metallic walls. Various mechanical limbs, weapon attachments, and robotic assistants were on display, some of them actively demonstrating their functions, which let's say aren't PG-13. A towering, rust-colored demon with 3 arms and a set of yellow eyes sat behind the counter, polishing a sleek, standard rifle with a wicked grin on his face. I leaned forward on the counter, getting his attention by tapping the counter with my 2 fingers in a rhythmic beat. We're here for a robot. Something durable, smart, and preferably capable of reducing a target to a pile of ash. Got anything like that? The shopkeeper's grin widened, his jagged teeth glinting under the dim red lighting. You got good timing, pal. Got my last combat-grade security model right here. He gestured to a large crate on the side, motioning for one of his assistants to pry it open. The moment the lid popped off, a sleek, humanoid robot was revealed. Its chassis was made of reinforced hell steel, with glowing red optics and retractable weapon compartments embedded into its forearms, though judging by my memories it was clearly an older model. It looked both menacing and expensive. Millie let out a low whistle. Damn, sir, that thing looks like it could tear someone apart. That's the idea, Blitz said, crossing my arms. Alright, how much? The shopkeeper leaned forward, resting his massive arms on the counter. 12,000 souls. If Moxie had been here, he'd have already screeched about price gouging. But since he wasn't, I had to channel his spirit. 12,000? The average high-end combat bot costs 10. You're fleecing us. The shopkeeper shrugged. Supply and demand, short stack. This is my last one, and if you don't want it, someone else will. I clicked his tongue, tapping my foot. Alright fine, we'll take it. Millie eyed the shopkeeper as if she was going to gut him at any second. I put a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. Sir, we're getting scammed. She hissed. We ain't just gonna let this baw. I cut her off with a smug grin. Calm down, Mills, it's not about the money. And I am sure this baby will pay for itself. Millie groaned, not enjoying my attitude in this situation but backed down regardless. With the deal settled, the shopkeeper's lackeys loaded the robot onto a dolly and handed me a remote, wheeling it toward the exit. I signed the necessary paperwork, mostly just forms declaring they wouldn't hold the shop responsible if this thing melts your face off. And handed over the payment. Dragging the robot back to IMP's office was a process. The thing was heavy, despite the assistance of the dolly, and I had of course refused to rent a transport for it. After all, there's no need to be scammed twice. Millie, still fuming, muttered under his breath the entire way back while helping me pull the dolly. By the time we reached the front entrance, Luna had woken up, stretching as she looked down at them from her desk. The hell is that? Our new office bot, I declared proudly, shoving the dolly through the front door with an exaggerated flourish. The bot's metallic limbs jostled from the impact, making a loud clanking noise as it settled in the middle of the room. Moxie, walking in like a perfectly timed sitcom, groaned, face palmed with a stack of papers crumpling in his GRP in his other hand. This is ridiculous. This is progress, I corrected, patting the machine's head. Alright, Let's boot this thing up. Millie, who had instantly got a pep in her step, went forward eagerly, crouching behind the robot to locate its power switch. Ooh, there's a settings panel back here. Let's see what it can do. She flicked open a small compartment on its back, revealing an array of dials and switches. Some were standard, combat mode, surveillance, emergency lockdown, but a few were more questionable. Moxie squinted. Why is there a rampage setting? My grin widened. I dunno, but I like it. Millie turned a few knobs, setting it to defensive mode before flipping the activation switch. The robot's optics flickered to life, scanning the room before standing at full height. Its voice came out in a deep, robotic tone. Operational. Awaiting directives. I clapped my hands together. Oh, I am gonna have so much fun with this thing. Moxie pinched the bridge of his nose. This is going to end in flames, I just know it. Blitz slung an arm around his shoulders. Oh, Mox, you gotta have more faith. What's the worst that could happen? As if on cue, the robot's optics flickered for a brief second, its head twitching slightly before stabilizing. Luna, still half asleep, muttered, "Yeah, that thing's totally not gonna kill us in our sleep." I ignored her, rubbing my hands together excitedly. It wasn't perfect, but I could easily fix the bugs out. I just needed to figure out what they were first. Alright, let's give it a test run. Who wants to volunteer? I said, grabbing the manual and flipping to the commands page. Moxie took a step back immediately. Absolutely not. Millie, on the other hand, grinned. Oh, I do. I want to see if it can dodge. With a press of a button, the robot entered training mode, and before anyone could properly react, Millie lunged at it with her knives. The bot moved with decent speed, twisting its frame to avoid her slashes while recalibrating its defenses. The two engaged in a brief, intense spar, Millie laughing excitedly as she tested its reflexes. It clearly wasn't up to par of a Fizzeroli robot, maybe equal to the old one in Lulu Land, but nothing crazy. Still, I could make this work. I watched with amusement spread across my face, leaning toward Moxie. See? Totally worth 12,000. Moxie sighed. We're all gonna die. HMPH, yeah, but at least we'll look cool doing it. I chuckled. Millie dancing around the robot, taking her knives out, preparing to go at it even harder now. The bot responded in kind with mechanical precision, blocking and dodging her stabs with calculated efficiency, but it was clear it wasn't anything extraordinary. Just a standard foot soldier level, nothing close to elite combat unit I had really hoped for. Clang! Millie kicked off its chest, flipping backward with a smirk. Peeved, this thing's slow. I could take it out in my sleep. I could only shrug, flipping through the manual. It's got other features. Let's test the weapon systems. I pressed a few buttons on the remote given, and the robot's forearm panels slid open, revealing a compact machine gun barrel. Moxie took several steps back, anticipating impending danger. Oh no. The bot raised its arm, taking aim. It pointed at the makeshift targets I just set up, some old beer cans stacked on a chair. Bang, bang, bang. The shots rang out, shredding the cans to pieces. Its accuracy wasn't bad, but then. Clunk. The gun barrel didn't retract. Instead, the weapon system glitched, the bullets still chambered inside the arm as the panel tried to close. Crunch. Bang, bang. The rounds fired inside the robot's own arm, sparks erupting from its elbow joint as the malfunction sent it staggering. Millie yelped, diving behind the couch. What the fuck? Moxie threw his hands up. Shit, I knew it, cover sir. I was still calm, reading through the manual and just TSKED and pressed the emergency shutdown button. The robot's optics flickered before dimming, its systems powering down with a pathetic whir. Silence. Although this was old, it was only by a year. Clearly robots with gun attachments down here in hell weren't fully developed as hand-to-hand models. It's probably why no one higher up actually uses them in hell these days, but that was only just a guess through my memories. Then, Moxie groaned, rubbing his temples. Okay, so, it's defective. How are we supposed to fix that? I waved a hand dismissively. Oh, we're not fixing it, Mox. Moxie blinked. What? I put a hand to my hip. Trust me, it'll be free. Moxie's eye twitched. Who? Before he could finish, the front door swung open. The interns, two scrawny, wide-eyed demons fresh out of Hell Community College, stepped inside, holding coffee trays and exchanging horrified glances. One of them squeaked, staring at the smoking robot. We brought the files you asked for. Perfect timing. You too. Welcome to IMP headquarters, I'll be your manager. I gestured grandly at the room. Moxie sighed, shaking his head. I just gave a smile, noticing they were staring at the robot's sparking dented chassis. This was just team building, don't worry too much about it. Millie, leaning against the back of the couch, hello, welcome. Luna, now fully awake, smirked and took a sip of her coffee. Place your bets now. How long, till it explodes? The interns looked like they wanted to quit on the spot but managed their expression. Even with the chaos surrounding me, I could only hold a wide smile. Today's the day for big changes. A few hours later. The sun was now in the center of the sky. The smell of burnt wires still lingered in the office, a not-so-gentle reminder of the catastrophe. The office was unusually quiet when the two new interns, Felon and Turbs, sat awkwardly in the chairs across from my desk. Moxie adjusted his glasses, flipping through their resumes while I rested my feet on the desk, balancing a knife between my fingers. They looked tense, like they were waiting for me to throw something at them. I decided to ease the tension. All right, fellas, first things first. Welcome to IMP. I know things can get a little chaotic around here, but I hope you two can help make this place better. I shot them both a grin, setting the knife down. So let's talk about where you'll fit in. Mox, take it away. Moxie hesitated for a brief moment, scanning over Felon's resume. Felon, you have a background in finance? That's surprising. He looked up at the bespectacled intern, who pushed his glasses up his nose nervously and nodded. Why yeah, I did a couple of internships back in college, and I have experience in accounting and budgeting. That's exactly what we need, I said, nodding. Our finances are a bit adventurous, but nothing you can't handle. You'll be in charge of keeping us from going broke. Think you can handle that? Felon gulped but gave a determined nod. I'll do my best, sir. Good attitude, I like that. I turned to Turbs. And you? Says here you have some background in IT? I mentioned in a approving tone. Turbs nodded, glancing at Luna, who was leaning back in her chair, scrolling through her phone. I guess I could handle tech support. Great, you'll be Luna's assistant, I said, turning toward the open door revealing the office where Luna was lazily leaning back in her chair. Luna ear twitched in our direction briefly and she groaned, giving me a, seriously? Look. Yup, it's a match made in heaven. I said aloud. She'll be teaching you how to handle the emails, fix the computers, and everything else you might do up there. I hopped up from my seat, stretching my arms before turning toward the combat bot still sitting in the middle of the office. Gotta haul this pile of junk into storage. Take care of them for me, Moxie. As I pushed the dented robot toward the entrance storage closet, my mind churned through possibilities. I'd done some research on my phone and according to schematics and reviews every single combat model had the same issues: overheating, misfiring, jamming, delays and even spontaneous explosions. That wasn't a defect. That was just standard in hell. The only robotic constructs that actually functioned well were ones designed for leisure. Fizzeroli, for example, had top-tier mobility and decent close combat capability, but tended to glitch even when it was new. The only perfectly functioning combat-based robotics here was attachments like the real Fizzeroli had. No one in hell seemed to have figured out how to make a reliable combat AI. Which only meant I needed someone from the human world to fix it. It was an obvious solution. Drop the robot into the hands of some independent coders or a research team, let them absorb the code and mechanisms of the robot, and have them improve it. With any luck, they'd be dumb enough not to involve the government. Simple. All I needed now was someone to monitor the whole thing. Lucky for me, the interns had perfect timing. My eyes flicked back toward the group. Talking to the interns was now Moxie and Millie. Securing our robot into the closet, I headed toward them. I should tell them my idea. But if I want Moxie to agree, especially after spending so much on the robot, I needed a more convincing hand. As I drew closer, their conversation began to shift as I overheard Millie and Moxie talking while setting up some paperwork for the two demons waiting diligently. I walked into the room, interjecting myself into the scene as everyone turned their heads in my direction. I spoke loudly. Anyways, everyone, I say we all hit up a bar Friday to celebrate our new workforce. Drinks are on me. Moxie immediately shook his head. Thanks, but we already have plans. What couple stuff could be more fun than getting drunk with your friends? I raised my brow teasingly, though I already knew I wasn't going to drink. Millie beamed, grabbing Moxie's arm. It ain't just any couple stuff, sir. Moxie got us a reservation at Ozzy's for our anniversary. I blinked. You managed to get a reservation? I said absent-mindedly to the pair, but in my head internally contemplating on what to do. Moxie nodded, looking smug. I pulled a few strings. Millie let out a happy squeal, squeezing Moxie's arm. I can't believe we're actually gonna get to eat there. I, of course, was less enthused. I knew what happened to couples at Ozzy's, especially these two. They'd get laughed off stage before having a chance to enjoy their night together. The place catered to sinful debauchery, not genuine romance. If Millie and Moxie went there expecting a sweet, romantic evening, they'd be at the very least humiliated. I scratched my chin, deep in thought. The simplest solution was obvious. Make sure they didn't get mocked in front of everyone. But how? I couldn't step in without embarrassing myself, and I sure as hell wasn't about to let them ruin their anniversary. I needed a plan. I hadn't talked to Stolas for a while, maybe. No, I had to drag her here even to get in. This is gonna get complicated. Verosica, Asmodeus and Fizaroli were all variables I had to account for. I'm gonna have to get real creative with this one. I muttered. For now, though, I had a robot to fix and interns to keep in check. Big changes were coming and I needed to be prepared. Millie stood in front of the cracked mirror in their shared bedroom, adjusting her shoulder-less black dress for the 5th time. It hugged her frame just right, glittering faintly in the light. Her tail curled and uncurled with excitement. Do you think it's too much? She asked, spinning slightly on her newly purchased heels. Moxie adjusted the collar of his freshly pressed suit. Absolutely not. You look perfect, he said with a goofy smile that made her cheeks flush. You too, sugar, she giggled, pulling him in for a kiss on the cheek. I still can't believe we're going to Ozzy's. I had to bribe half a dozen demons and promise favors I can't repeat out loud, Moxie said proudly, adjusting his tie. But it was worth it. I leaned against the front door, arms crossed, watching them with what I hoped passed for a supportive smile and not whatever complicated expression was actually happening on my face. You two look like the before shot of a horror movie romance montage, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Thanks, sir. Millie beamed, completely unfazed by the jab. Moxie adjusted his bow tie with that same nervous puffed chest pride he always got when he actually managed to impress someone other than Millie. I smiled fully but my thoughts were elsewhere. Back at Imp, I'd been pacing back and forth just moments ago near the couch, chewing the corner of a magazine that definitely didn't belong in any dentist's waiting room. I'd gone over 20 ideas that morning, most of them falling somewhere between absolutely unhinged and deeply illegal. The frontrunner earlier had been yelling, "Holy shit, is that Stolas?" while pointing at the ceiling and dragging the lovebirds away in the confusion. But that had way too many variables. And it depended on people's reactions who I couldn't anticipate. Which, in that club, it'd probably start a mosh pit. No, I needed a guaranteed play. One I didn't like the idea of but one I knew would work. As the couple made their way down the stairs of the apartment building, dressed to the nines and glowing with excitement, I forced on a grin. We all reached outside and I stepped forward, giving each of them a pat on the back. You two have fun. Remember, if they throw tomatoes, dodge left, they've got a right-hand bias. Millie laughed, dragging Moxie toward the door. We'll bring you back a doggy bag, if there's anything left. Not if I order the shrimp tower first, Moxie added with a grin as they disappeared out the door. As soon as the door clicked shut, my smile dropped. Rushing back upstairs, I snatched my phone from the arm of the couch and dialed. It barely rang once before the screen lit up with a contact labeled Stolas Dizzy. Blitzy Tilda? Stolas's voice rang out in excitement. You finally called me. I was beginning to think you forgot all about our last. Yeah, hey, look, I need a favor. Kind of a big one, I said quickly, opening the door and searching through my back for a halfway decent buttoned shirt. You want to go out tonight? Somewhere nice? There was a pause on the other end, followed by a very intrigued hum. Oh? Like a date? Stolas purred. Where to, darling? I flung open my bag, yanking out a half-wrinkled jacket and white button shirt. Aussies. Pick you up in 20. A gasp. Aussies? Oh, Blitz, yes. Of course, I'd love to. Great. Dress sexy. Not like you don't already, but you know. Extra. I paused, brushing imaginary dust off my jacket. It's gonna be a night. Stolas giggled like a schoolgirl. Can't wait. Cool. Gotta go. I hung up before she could say anything else. For a moment, I just stood there, phone still in hand, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror. A date with Stolas. I had to focus on my main mission. But right now, all I could think about was the dumb grin she'd probably show up wearing. I exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. I hate this, he muttered. But they deserve a good night. And if it takes using Stolas to make it happen. He paused, looking down at the suit he was throwing on. I'll just make sure it means something to her. Even if it's just for tonight. And with that, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. The IMP van coughed and wheezed its way to a stop outside Aussie's, exhaust sputtering like it was dying for dramatic effect. I slapped the steering wheel a couple times before killing the engine, leaning back in my seat with a long exhale. Already, the bass from inside the club was rattling the glass. I stared out the windshield at the glowing neon sign above the door, Aussies in big, tacky, ego-stroking letters, and tried to convince myself I wasn't about to regret everything I was doing tonight. Millie and Moxie deserved at least one damn night to feel like something in this world wasn't out to crush their joy. So yeah, I'd pulled strings, bent rules, and called in a favor I didn't want to cash yet. But it'd be worth it. I stepped out of the van and shut the door a little harder than necessary, adjusting my jacket and straightening the collar like that could cover the fact I felt like I was crawling out of my own skin. Then I saw her. The limo rolled up smooth, black and polished like a predator in a tux. The door opened, and out stepped Stolas. And she looked, holy hell. Her maroon dress draped like liquid sin, hugging every inch like it knew what it was doing. A black tank-styled top shaped her upper half, simple but stupidly flattering. Over her shoulders, a white fur cape fluttered down to her ankles, and every time she moved, the galaxy print lining inside shimmered like stars trying to escape. She looked like the night sky decided to take a personal interest in ruining my concentration. She caught sight of me and smiled that soft, eager smile. The one that said she was hoping for more than just drinks. I cleared my throat and pulled a Moxie, tugging on my collar. Stepping forward with what I hoped passed for charm. Well, shit, I muttered, grinning. Stolas twirled once, cape flaring out like a solar flare. You said to go extra, darling. I don't do things halfway. Yeah, no kidding, I said, offering my arm. Let's get this over with before I forget why we're here. She giggled, tucking herself in beside me, and we made our way toward the entrance under the pounding beat of Lust's nightlife. The second we walked in, it hit me, the lights, the noise, the smell of overpriced booze and bad decisions. Aussies was alive tonight, packed with demons dressed to kill and probably doing it between shots. It was overstimulating, loud enough to make a lesser imp piss himself. And right at the front near the stage, I spotted them. Millie in her black dress that still shimmered even in this lighting. Moxie looking sharp and slightly nervous, probably due to his incoming performance, fidgeting with the silverware like it might bite him. Their faces lit up in a way that made my chest ache a little. That's why I was here. That's why I dragged Stolas into this. I can't let my team down. She followed my lead, smiling down at my stature. Just reached for her drink menu and crossed one leg over the other like she owned the place. I took my seat beside her, still on edge. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flash of white near the bar in the back. Veronica. Perched on a high stool, drink in hand, laughing at something some incubus said before her eyes flicked lazily toward me. We locked eyes for a second, maybe less, but it felt longer. She arched a brow, seemingly contemplating if it was actually me, and turned away like I wasn't worth a second glance. Classy. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. Stolas noticed the shift in my posture and gently nudged my leg under the table. I shook it off with a grunt and focused back on the main floor. I glanced around the room, tracking the waitstaff, watching the crowd, thinking through backup plans. And then the lights dimmed. We took our seats a few tables off to the side, close enough to intercept anything ugly. Not so close that Moxie would blow a gasket over the company. I glanced around the room, tracking the waitstaff, watching the crowd, thinking through backup plans. And then the lights dimmed. A hush swept through the club like someone hit a mute button, then the spotlight exploded onto the stage. "Welcome, lovers and losers." Fizzaroli's voice burst from the speakers like a sugar-coated firecracker. "It's another sizzling night here at Ozzy's, the only place where you can lose your dignity and your underwear in under 5 minutes." Laughter and cheers. Glitter cannons went off near the ceiling. Then Asmodeus himself strutted out behind Fizz, trailing sequins and pure ego. "And tonight, we've got a lineup so steamy, we had to put a warning label on the mics, baby." Fizz grinned, striking a pose. "You know her, you love her, and if you don't, you're lying. Give it up for the queen of heartbreak herself, Verosika Mayday." The crowd erupted. Verosika stood from her spot at the bar, drink still in hand, and sauntered to the stage like she owned the floor. She didn't even glance at me this time, just soaked up the applause and bathed in her own spotlight. Stolas leaned toward me. "She's rather popular." "She's rather a pain in my ass," I muttered. Verosika blew a kiss to the audience and stepped off stage to wait her turn. Fizzaroli grinned, spinning dramatically. "But first, we've got a sweet little something to kick things off. A song, straight from the heart. Written and performed by none other than Moxie." Millie gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "You didn't." Moxie stood up slow, blushing from his horns to his boots, and adjusted his collar like he might suffocate on it. He climbed the steps onto the stage, clearly shaking, clutching a folded piece of sheet music like a lifeline. The crowd paused. I tightened my jaw. Not much applause, a few chuckles, some whispering. But then he started to sing. And it was earnest. Sweet. I'm kinda shocked no one else besides Asmodeus and Fizzaroli liked the song. His voice was powerful in sense. A love song with too many metaphors and way too much heart for a place like this. Millie was glowing, practically vibrating with happiness. The audience? Not so much. Laughter bubbled up, not the good kind. Snickering, sarcasm, someone did a fake swoon off a chair. Fizzaroli began creeping around making Moxie back up, leaned into the mic with a cackle. "Ah, isn't that precious? Sounds like someone's been saving himself for heartbreak." Ozzy followed soon after with a mad smile surrounded by green fog. "Well, isn't that adorable? We have some lovebirds in my lustful lounge." Moxie faltered, his voice completely disappearing from the stage. And that was it. Didn't think, didn't need to. My boots hit the floor hard as I cut through the tables like I was headed to war. I stopped just inside the spotlight's edge. Let the light catch me full on. Then I said it. Loud, sharp, cutting through the tension like a broken bottle in a bar fight. "Oh, that's rich, coming from you too." The room froze. Fizz's smile stiffened. Asmodeus cocked his head, curious. I didn't stop. "Funny how you're so quick to mock a guy for singing about love, when half of hell's been whispering about how you two are playing house behind closed doors." A few gasps, a few stunned laughs. You could feel the air change, like everyone suddenly forgot how to breathe. Fizz's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. "Yeah, that's right. We've all heard it. The big bad prince of lust and his little spark plug cuddling up like something out of a sappy romance novel. No orgies, no fanfare, just feelings and quiet nights in." I stepped in closer, voice lowering but no less sharp. "So tell me, Fizz, what's the real punchline here? That Moxie wrote a love song? Or that he had the guts to sing it out loud?" Fizz's laugh came a second too late. A little too loud. "Oh, please, Blitzy, don't project your sad little romance fantasies onto me and Ozzy. We're just having fun, baby. That's what lust is, remember?" But his smile didn't reach his eyes. And Ozzy didn't say a word. Just stood behind him, still, expression unreadable, but focused. Like he was seeing something he didn't expect. I raised a brow. Didn't smile. "You sure about that?" I said, quiet now. I turned my gaze out to the crowd. Moxie's up there singing because he loves someone. And yeah, maybe that's corny. Maybe it's embarrassing, but it's real. And in a place like this? I swept my arm toward the stage. That kind of honesty takes more balls than a dozen lust demons dry humping on a stage. Fizz recovered quicker than I expected. He pivoted back to the crowd with a wide, theatrical grin, arms out like he'd just crushed a heckler at a comedy club. You hear that, folks? Somebody get Blitz a standing ovation for bravely dragging his delusions on stage. Laughter erupted, loud, ugly. Get over yourself, clown. Someone shouted near the bar. He's just jealous he can't get laid without a royal pity party. Go cry into a rat trap, imp. Someone chucked an ice cube that bounced off my shoulder. Then a breadstick. Then a glass that shattered by my feet. I didn't flinch. But my throat was locked tight. My whole body tensed like it wanted to snap into 1,000 pieces. This was embarrassing, but just as planned. I turned to check the table. Millie looked horrified. Moxie halfway off the stage was returning to his seat but looked like he was going to attack. Luckily Millie, in a rare instance of restraint, stopped him with a hand on his arm. Smart. Stay seated. Don't draw more fire. More booze now. More shouting. Something sticky hit the back of my jacket and slid down. Maybe wine. Maybe not. And then something heavier hit the floor by my feet. Looked like someone actually hurled a chair. Time to go. I bolted. Through the tables, past the bar, through a side exit glowing red with emergency light and smelling like old cigarette smoke and cheaper regrets. I hit the alley and didn't stop until I hit the parking lot, hands on my knees, heart pounding in my ears. Footsteps were behind me. I turned, ready to snarl, but it was her. Stolas. Her heels clicked against the pavement, cape fluttering like a bloody whisper behind her. Didn't look like a queen anymore. She just looked worried. Blitz. Don't, I muttered, wiping something off my face. Not tears, just sweat, probably. I didn't, she paused, voice catching. I didn't know they'd react like that. Yeah, well, I said, laughing once without humor. Turns out people don't like being told their favorite couple might actually have feelings. Go figure. She stepped closer, but I backed up a pace. Because if she touched me, if she said something soft, I might break in a way I didn't have time for. Was it true? She asked quietly. What you said to Fizz? I looked at her. At the stars still shimmering in the inside of her cape. At the way her hands were shaking slightly, like she'd felt every sharp word the crowd threw just as hard as I had. I don't know, I said. But maybe they needed to hear it. She stared at me for a moment, then nodded once. And just like that, she stood beside me, not reaching out, not asking for more. Just there. Which, right now, was the one thing I hadn't realized I needed. I couldn't leave Stolas like this though. I gently pawned her hand, wrapping it around mine, leaning closer towards her. It wasn't much but enough for now. I didn't completely succeed in helping out their date or even mine, but at the very least, I can say I tried. Author note. Longest chapter ever, I swear. Hope you guys enjoyed. Part 2 is gonna be peak, trust.